Good evening. Welcome to your Thursday evening dose of astronomy. I'm Irene Pease. I'm here with the Amateur Astronomers Association out of New York City. You can find us at aaa.org and follow us on the social media things at AAADOTORG. Tonight we're flip-flopping things around, making up, down, and down, up, and there's no direction in space anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter. So starting off with the stellarium in the background, we'll still be using both stellarium, which you can find at stellarium.org, and OpenSpace, found at openspaceproject.com. But as usual, we'll kind of start off with stellarium and we'll flip back and forth a little bit more than usual tonight, looking at the southern skies. So this was a little bit of a request from one of the AAA members who was interested in seeing more of the southern skies. I know if some people went and saw the solar eclipse a year or so ago, if you're planning on going and trying to view it again soon, oh, there's another one coming up. There's always another solar eclipse. But those have been in the southern hemisphere, and so you might want to get to know those skies a little bit if you're going to be traveling down under, as it were. I actually had plans to be in Australia this summer, which I'm not, thanks to other things happening. Worse things have happened. Yeah, so this is me sharing a little bit of what I would like to have been looking at, what I hope to be doing this past few weeks instead of hanging out in Brooklyn. Not that there's anything wrong with Brooklyn. We like Brooklyn. And oh look, the tree is gone. So starting off with this evening sky, I forgot to make the moon a little bit bigger. The moon is going to be kind of a crescent over there. I didn't actually look ahead at what's going to be in the sky. I'm assuming there'll be stars and stuff. No, just kidding. I always prepare tremendously. Not sure why our time is off. So let's go ahead and move to 9 o'clock tonight. And I can go ahead and get rid of our credits. I always going to forget that. And go ahead and take a look. So we're usually facing south anyway, and we're going to go a bit further south this week on our little trip. But first, a couple things to look for this week, a challenge or two. Last week I think I had 2 challenges. I have 2 challenges again this week. So since we're looking south, I wanted to focus on some southern things, and we have 2 southern objects that are out in the sky right now. So last week we looked over towards Sagittarius, and we saw the teapot, which some people are already familiar with. I'll just go ahead and bring up some of those lines to help us out. So we have the teapot here, and I also pointed out the teaspoon, a little spoon up there closer to the planets Jupiter and Saturn. Hopefully you've had a chance to see those. But then down below Sagittarius, south of it in the sky, we have this kind of curve of stars that's the southern crown. So there's a northern crown. I'm not sure if I pointed it out. I hopefully did. Let's just review that for kicks because we can. It's been a while. I usually look at this earlier in the summer. We're getting towards late summer now. But if you look at the Big Dipper, still up there in the northwest, 9 o'clock tonight from Brooklyn or nearby, you can follow the arc of the handle. You arc to Arcturus, which is in the constellation Bootes, that giant ice cream cone. Forget about the person. It doesn't look like a person. It's just an ice cream cone. So we just go with the ice cream cone. And then next to it is the giant tongue, which officially it's not really a tongue. Really, it's a crown. Okay, so that's the northern crown, Corona Borealis. And so now in the south, we have the southern crown, Corona Australis. It's more like a laurel, I guess. Okay, so for the Olympics that didn't happen, and we don't have to go there. So if you can find the teapot, and then it's a little bit fainter. They're a bit fainter than the stars of the teapot, but see if you can make out that southern crown. So that's one southern thing to look for this week in the night skies. And one other fun thing, we have, let's see if I can even find it. It's basically, you look south. I'm going to advance the time to, I think it's up a little bit later. Yeah, you could go out later. So it's like 11 o'clock. So this is kind of pushing it. So if you're up, later, I go to bed early these days. I know I'm not much of an astronomer right Don't tell anyone. But if you look in the south, I usually find it by finding the square of Pegasus. So if you're familiar with a great square of Pegasus, just turn part of that on. The western side points downwards towards the south. So does the eastern side, but the western side is pointing down towards this brighter star. So really, if you go outside 11 o'clock at night, look in the south, southeast, the bright star. All right, so not the planets, those are going to be west of due south, but a little east of due south, the bright star. It's a bright star in the south in the late summer, early fall, and that's Fomalhaut. Fomalhaut was really popular. It was wildly viewed and super, all this excitement in the news about it a little while back when they found a planet, an exoplanet, orbiting Fomalhaut. So it's relatively close. I may have just lied. Someone can see the distance. I'm not finding it right now. 25 light years, yeah, so not too terribly far away, and they think they directly imaged an exoplanet. So that's kind of like the exoplanet star that I like to show people. Be like, if you want to see an exoplanet, too bad, they're really faint and far away, but here's a bright star that has, it's relatively close and has an exoplanet. But Fomalhaut, so what's south about that? Yeah, I just told you it was in kind of the southeast part of the sky. It's part of the constellation Piscis Australis, which is the southern fish, not to be confused with the fishes, Pisces, which is really faint. All right, so these are faint, all right, but we'll get to those eventually in the fall. Piscis Australis is also very faint, but it has this one bright star at least, which is more than I can say for Pisces. So that bright star, Fomalhaut, if you can find that, then you've found kind of the snout or the nose or whatever fish have on the front of their faces of that southern fish. So you have a southern fish and a southern crown to look for this week. And of course, the planets, because they're awesome and they're still there. And yes, Mars is out even more, and we'll do plenty of Mars, I promise. So that's kind of our challenge. And normally now I would switch over to open space, but we're going to stick with stellarium for a little bit. And we're gonna use some stellarium actually to travel. We're gonna take a tour down south, like south, like not Florida. We're gonna go even further. So let me see my location window. I put in a location earlier. Yeah, that's the one. Lord Howe Island. Woo! So you can see how far south it is. We're at -31 degrees. Ooh, and it's winter. So that's exciting. And we're also in a different time zone. I wasn't sure about, I'm just gonna skip this part. See if we can skip to their time. I was gonna try and set it, but I don't know if I can catch the Australian. It's on a really odd time zone. It kind of has its own time zone. There it is, Lord Howe time zone. Because half of the year, like when it's on standard time or off standard time, then it's like 11 hours off, and then the other time it's 10.5 hours, and I can't even with that. So we even have the scenery. All right, so here we are, somewhere in the South Pacific. Australia's somewhere over yonder to the west, a ways away across that water in the west, and it's daytime, but we're gonna have the sun set, and it sets early because again it's winter time in this part of the world right now. So it's setting, let's see, before 7 o'clock. So isn't that nice? So southern skies. What's so great about the southern skies? Well, one, I think there's just an excitement, there's a little bit of novelty. So you look up, and at least for me, I was really excited about seeing more of the southern skies because it is new and exciting for me personally. I'm used to seeing the northern sky, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of it, and so just something new and different is always exciting and a fun challenge, something more to learn. But one of the really cool things I wanted to point out here is just exactly what we're not seeing. So actually, if I go back to the location window And we can see from here, if I just change the latitude a little bit, so if we move this base of the latitude, if we move further south, we can see more on the southern horizon. If we move back north, then our southern horizon sinks below the horizon, right? So depending on your latitude, you're seeing further south or further north. We'll come back to the 31 that we are for this particular location. And so from New York, if I bring up this circle, from New York, since New York City is at 40 degrees north, we see kind of a repeat of stuff in the north, right? So our North Star is above the horizon, and we see a little bit extra up there. But here at 31 degrees south, we would have the south celestial pole. There's not a south star per se, so wah wah. But other than that, southern sky, pretty awesome. But that's going to be 31 degrees off our southern horizon. And basically 40 degrees from that is what we cannot see from 40 degrees north. So if we were on the equator at 0, then this point would be on the horizon at 0 degrees above the horizon. Since New York City is 40 degrees north latitude, we're missing 10, 20, 30, 40 degrees. So everything inside of this circle is stuff that cannot be seen from New York City. So like these stars and this part of the Milky Way. So that's what I really want to focus on. So there's other stuff, like you can still see the planets from the southern sky, depending on how far south you are and what time of year it is. You can see, you know, a lot of that. But there's a stuff in this circle here that I can't see from New York City. So that's where we're gonna focus. Actually, I wanted to just bounce over to open space for just a moment. And we can see, yes. So, oh yeah, and here comes Australia. So if we were here, right, which we're not, but if we were, you know, basically the northern part of the night sky, all this stuff that's in the background now, that's being blocked by the Earth, right? If we're in the northern hemisphere over here, find New York City or somewhere on the East Coast, close enough. Yeah, apparently it's cloudy tonight. Or no, this was last night that we're looking at. It was cloudy last night. All right, so if we're up here-ish, say, then the Earth is in the way, so it's blocking all this stuff. So we can't see all these things that are in the background. So that's the reason for traveling to different latitudes, to see different parts of the sky. And again, if you're on the equator, you can see pretty much everything. Good for you. But for everyone else, we're missing a piece of the sky, and it's nice to, you know, just travel elsewhere and see something a little bit different. So a really cool thing about being at around 30 degrees south, so again here we're at, like I said, 31 degrees south, because I picked this spot because there was a landscape for it. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the atmosphere so we can rewind time to something just so, and I'm going to turn on a different grid. Sorry about all the grids, but I promise we'll get to the pretty stuff at some point soon. So we can see the Milky Way streaking overhead. And the grid that I turn on, this is the altitude azimuth, or alt-az grid. And so this is observer based. So, right, you have, you know, 0 around the horizon, and then the zenith, that's the point that's exactly overhead. That's the highest point. That's the most ideal thing, the ideal place for things to be in the sky when you look at them, because you're looking through the thinnest layer of atmosphere. You're looking straight up. When you look off to the horizon, then you're looking through thicker layer of atmosphere, and stars are twinklier and fuzzy spots are even fuzzier. But right overhead is where we have the very center of the galaxy. I believe I've pointed out at some point, if we look for Sagittarius in here, all right, see if I can even find it, even recognize it here. So we have Jupiter, Saturn. Yeah, so there's our teapot. We'll just turn on little lines here, right? So here's the teapot of Sagittarius. And the very center of our galaxy is kind of near where this little star is in the night sky. So you can see that point. I'll just go ahead and highlight it and turn on our alt-az grid again. That gets very close to being straight overhead. So if we advance time a little bit. Yeah, that's basically the center of the Milky Way galaxy, passes right overhead. You have the best view of the center of our galaxy from this southern latitude. So it's funny, a lot of the cultures that that are from this part of the world, or different parts of the world, but basically that latitude between 20 and 30 degrees south, because really there's not a whole lot of landmass below 30 degrees south. It's mostly ocean down there. But a lot of them saw the constellations a very different way. A lot of those cultures on different continents saw dark constellations, because you have such a beautiful view of like these dark patches from the dust that's in the Milky Way. They actually saw patterns in those. Whereas in the northern hemisphere, this doesn't get very high off of the horizon, so you don't have as good of a view of it. It's not taking up as much of your sky, so we don't see those. But anyway, that's one of my favorite things about the southern sky and just the Milky Way, just being able to see that right overhead, just really kind of neat. So speaking of the Milky Way, some of the things that I want to focus on, first we'll kind of look along this part of the Milky Way and see all the exciting things that would be in there, and then we'll kind of pop over to a different part. But I'll go ahead and bring the atmosphere back. Sorry, I kept people holding their breaths for a little while there. I adjusted the time. So yeah, no, it's still dark there. Okay. So if I were there with my telescope tonight, what would I be looking for? Well, a couple cool things. You can see some of the bright stars are already labeled. Achenar you can actually see from the southern US. I've seen that from Tucson. Rigel, Kent, and Hadar I have not seen from the US. If you're down in Florida, Hawaii, maybe you can. Actually, yes, you can from Hawaii, but definitely not from New York City. So Rigel Kent, as some of us like to call it, is also known as Alpha Centauri. That's basically, this is our Alpha Centauri system that a lot of folks have heard of, because that's kind of close to us. So that's about 4 point some odd light years away. So that's one of the closest star systems to our sun. So Rigel Kent, Alpha Cent, that's basically, you know, kind of famous. So you can't see that from the northern part of the sky, or from the northern hemisphere. You have to go down south to see that. And Hadar, that's just another bright star in the constellation Centaurus. So those two point towards this other group of stars that form, I don't know, kind of a cross. So we'll call it, I don't know, Crux. The cross. That's the Southern Cross. There is actually a Northern Cross that's an asterism. It's not an official constellation, but the central part of Cygnus the Swan that we've looked at in the past, that's also known as the Northern Cross. But Crux is actually the name of this constellation. So it's just a Southern Cross. It's just, you know, a simple little constellation there. But some nice bright stars. You notice it has the star Mimosa, which I didn't realize for a long time that that was also a drink. And so I would use that as names and like muds and stuff, because that's how old I am. And people were like, oh, you really like drink? I'm like, no, I like astronomy. What are you talking about? I just like the star Mimosa, which is a bright star in Crux, as everyone knows. At least they do now. So near Mimosa, there's a few really beautiful things you could check out. Just with the naked eye, you can see kind of this darker region. This is called the coal sack. It is a dark nebula, so basically from dust that's blocking our view. And I mentioned, you know, dark constellations earlier. That's supposed to be the head of the Emu. So there's an Emu constellation that streaks along there, where the coal sack would be the head of the Emu. That has this big old Emu body lying along there. So there's the coal sack, so you can pick that out. You don't need a telescope. You wouldn't want to use a telescope to see that. It's too big. But one thing you would look for in a telescope, and I have, is near Mimosa, there's, I mean, you're looking along the plane of the Milky Way. So there's just going to be a lot of really beautiful open clusters and a lot of nebulae. So this little open cluster has a super cute name. It's called the Jewel Box. And you can see it looks like a little jewel box. That's exactly what my jewel box looks like. All those diamonds and a ruby. Just kidding. Mine are all rubies, no diamonds. No, really. But just kind of like this beautiful smattering of like a couple really bright stars. There's another cluster that I haven't seen, and now it's definitely on my to find list a little further down here. A couple really great clusters here, actually. We'll get to some of the nebulae. There's the Southern Pleiades that we have over here. So that one you can almost pick out. You say, oh, that looks like an interesting thing over there. Yes, over here we have Let's see if it'll call it that. No, it won't. This little grouping over here by Theta Car is that's the Southern Pleiades. I'm not sure why it's the Southern Pleiades. I mean, I think the Pleiades is kind of like a little dipper. I can't quite imagine it, a mini dipper, a little frying pan there, but very cute, very pretty, nice bright stars, kind of like the jewel box, but not as colorful. And then over here, this other smudge, I know you're wondering about, because you're like, oh wow, there's another smudge. Just kidding. There's a whole bunch of smudges. So this would be just a great part of the sky to scan with binoculars, as you can probably tell. So this cluster has some really super cute names, and the guidebook described it as magnificent. So definitely want to put this on your list. It's called, if I can get the name to pop up, it's called the Wishing Well Cluster, or it's also called it's like a group of fireflies. So I think it just has a beautiful name, and it looks like a really beautiful cluster even in these pictures. So a couple of really nice open clusters that hopefully you could check out. And then, oh, you've probably noticed this. This blob of gas, this big nebula, that's called the running chicken, which just has a funny name. I just really like the names of some of the stuff in the southern sky. If you see a running chicken there, I don't know, good for you. But this other nebula down here, this is the Carina Nebula. So this is one of the brighter nebula in the southern sky, and really all over the whole sky. There's all kinds of little pieces of it, but it's just a huge star-forming region, many times bigger than the Orion Nebula. So the closest thing we would have to this would be the Orion Nebula in the northern hemisphere, which is also really beautiful. But this has several open clusters associated with it, so several groups of young stars that have already formed from the collapsing gas as it condenses to form baby stars. And some of the youngest open clusters, some that are only like about 500,000 years old. So those are like fresh, hot off the press, newly formed stars in this region. So several hundred light years across. Most nebulae like this are only on the order of about 100 light years across, but this is at least 200, 230 light years across. So really big, really bright, really beautiful, and all kinds of stars, multiple groupings of stars in there lighting it up. If you look through like some of the NASA Hubble images, you'll recognize some of the things in here. There's the Mystic Mountain and all this. There's just a lot. Well, just look at it. There's a lot. So for the sake of time, we'll move on to the other kind of side of the sky. If you recall way back when, I may have mentioned a globular cluster that just barely skims the southern horizon from New York City. I'm going to kind of like zoom out a little bit. It's basically due south of Spica. So we can see Spica in the constellation Virgo. And then if you catch Spica when it's right along the meridian, when it's at the highest point, and look all the way south, I think this is it. It could be way off. Yep, no, that's it. Doesn't say that's it, but that's it. So this is Omega Centauri. That's one of the brightest globular clusters in the whole sky. And just a little bit north of it is this hamburger. They called it the Hamburger Galaxy. It's like this big old galaxy that has this dust lane going through it. I'm gonna go not hamburger, I'm gonna go the 12 ball for all you pool and billiard fans out there. So it has like a dark, not quite purple, but we'll just call it purple stripe across that. 12 ball. Okay. So the 12 ball galaxy and Omega Centauri. I mentioned Omega Centauri is one of the brightest globular clusters. So those have not just dozens or hundreds or a few thousand stars like the open clusters that are in these star forming regions, but those will have 1 million, on the order of hundreds of thousands or 1 million or more stars. The other really, really awesome globular cluster in our night sky that you can see in the south, not the north, is going to be on the other side of the Milky Way. So this is kind of one side of the Milky Way. We're going to jump over here and look at the other side of the Milky Way. So I'm going to go through time just a little bit later, and yeah. And the main things you're seeing over there The fuzzy spots, you can probably guess. These are the Magellanic Clouds, which again, this is like a thing that people in the north, they just, even I didn't even really fully appreciate, and I still don't fully appreciate because I haven't had time to study these in depth. I've only seen them just barely glimpsed, and mostly through binoculars, not even really through a telescope. But this is what I feel like you could just spend weeks just staring at, especially the large Magellanic Cloud. So over here is small Magellanic Cloud. It is actually smaller in space, and we'll see that in a little bit in open space. And it's a little further away, so it does look smaller in our sky. But nearby, this is 47 Tuc. So 47 Tucana in the constellation Toucan. So we're in Tucana, the toucan. There's like 6 birds down here, believe it or not. They squished 6 birds into this part of the sky. Well, Columba is not quite in this part. Columba you can see from the north. But you have, I'm just going to do real quick. Tucana the toucan, Phoenix the phoenix, Grus the crane, Pavel the peacock, Apis the bird of paradise. And there's also a fly and a flying fish, but those don't quite count, do they? Did I miss one? I think that's most of them. Anywho, so we're in Toucan, Tucana, yeah, the toucan. But you have the small Magellanic Cloud, which you can already see, like there's some nebulae, there's some other globular clusters, a little globular cluster over here that's not really part of the small Magellanic Cloud. But this whole other tiny little dwarf galaxy that's like right next door, but it's still a separate galaxy, and you can see like all these features in it. So that's just like a part of the sky I really want to spend some time on with a telescope. And of course, especially the large Magellanic Cloud. I mean, just, oh my gosh, okay. So many features in here, and I'm only starting to learn some of them. Probably the most well-known is the Tarantula Nebula. So this nebula is huge. Like I said, the Carina Nebula was big. This thing is like super, super huge. This is many times bigger. It might actually be one of the largest star-forming regions in the local group. So of all the galaxies in our local group, all the dwarf galaxies around the Milky Way, all of the dwarf galaxies around Andromeda and Triangulum, this might actually be the largest star-forming region in this little dwarf galaxy that we can see from the southern sky. So over 900 light years in radius, we think. So this is much, much bigger than the others. And of course, lots of stars have formed in there, all kinds of cute little features. So that would be one thing to look for. Also, there's a dragon head, apparently, which has sounded like a really cool name. So the dragon head is part of all of these features over here. And there's also a bean nebula, which is way up here, that has a whole bunch of like sub-features of its own. So up in here, the Bean Nebula, there's like a little globular cluster there, and there's a little piece called the Rose Nebula. Just so much detail, and it just kind of boggles my mind that these are all in another galaxy, and yet you can see them with like a reasonable sized telescope. So some really, really cool stuff. And I just wanted to show just a little bit. There's one other constellation I kind of wanted to point out. And we can do that. We'll kind of flip back and forth between Stellarium and open space to do that. If I turn on just constellations, there's one really cool southern constellation. Not that one, this one. Other than the fly. I mean, the fly. It's a giant fly. It's kind of cute. Two of my favorite southern constellations are these two. So this is Mensa. Mensa the table, which sometimes is drawn as a table, but actually it's Table Mountain, so that's why this thing doesn't look like a table. It looks kind of like a mountain, like these are supposed to be clouds going off of it. So this is Table Mountain, which is by Yorktown, Cape York, in South Africa, right? So it's actually a geographical feature on the Earth. And then Reticulum, the reticle, which I think is really neat because it looks very geometric. Let me just turn this off. So it looks very like this very geometric thing here. So that's kind of amazing. So just some really interesting constellations. Of course, those are ones that were that someone else came up with, like not someone who had lived there all their lives. So a bunch of Westerners went down south and explored and just kind of made up stuff. And I won't get into that. We'll get into constellations from different cultures another time. But yeah, I did want to go ahead and just take a quick trip in open space. I'll go ahead and turn off the constellations if I remember how. And we'll kind of zoom out. We'll turn on the constellation lines as a marker and actually see, I wanted to see where the large and small Magellanic Clouds are in space relative to us. So make just a quick trip outside the galaxy, constellation lines on, and we can zoom way out. So moving out from our solar system, out from our little corner of the galaxy, but we can see where we are, our spot in the Milky Way galaxy. We know that we're in the center of where those lines are. So if we move out just a little bit further, we should see our local group objects turning on. And I think I need to be on the other side of here. So we'll just go ahead and bring up a couple things. Oh yeah, so there go, there go a few of the blobs. That's us. So I'm gonna see if I can just turn off a couple of things here. And we don't need all the other galaxies because we don't care about those right now. Galaxies, just the local group is fine. Turn off those for now. Right, so there went one of the Magellanic Clouds. Right, so we have, I think this one's a small, large. We'll go ahead and put on some labels for those. If I can find my labels. But yeah, actually, if we were, I like to imagine, like, what if, I was on a planet in another part of the galaxy or something. That could actually be really neat. Like, if we could look back and see the Milky Way from this point of view. And of course, so the image of the Milky Way that we're looking at now, that's not a real image of the Milky Way. And in fact, we know now it's not quite like that. We would have a little bit more of a bar than a bulge, so it's slightly elongated. So some of the Gaia data was able to kind of solidify that idea. So, but we have the small and then a little bit closer, the large Magellanic Clouds. So these are on the order of, they're less than 1 million, it's not like the kind of thing there, less than 1 million light years away from us. So about 200,000 light years away. So just like 1/10 of the way to the Milky Way, or sorry, to the Andromeda galaxies. So they're out there. But they're a lot closer, or sorry, they're a lot further away, I should say, than, say, the globular clusters. So if I just turn on a few of those are kind of in the halo, which I just turned them on, I don't know if you can see them or not. But like the 47 Tuc, that one's actually pretty close in here. So I think this might actually be it here. I want to say this is actually 47 Tuc. If it's not, it's close by because it's actually pretty close compared to the dwarf galaxies that are way out there. So just a little bit of perspective of looking in a different direction. If we were just on a different place on the Earth, like all the different things we could see that are just kind of nearby in our universe, and then kind of a little bit wider perspective of if we were just nearby on like one of these little dwarf galaxies, how different would our night sky be seeing just this local large galaxy there. So we'll jump back to credits. Here we go, credits. So I just want to thank you. Hopefully everyone enjoyed a little tour of the southern sky from someone who's not actually from the southern hemisphere. Yeah, thanks for joining us for your tour of the tour of a local universe, Thursday evening dose of astronomy. Again, I'm Irene Pease with the Amateur Astronomers Association, and we're in New York City. You can find out more about what we're doing at aaa.org and follow us on the social media things at AAADOT.org. And again, the visualizations that I was using most recently, the open space, using to kind of visualize the whole galaxy and the globular clusters, you can download that for free at openspaceproject.com, and you can find Stellarium, which you see in the background now, at stellarium.org. Thank you so much for joining us, and be safe out there.